I was so furious but not surprised when I saw the Bloomberg News report that the Biden administration is now considering draining $200 million out of Army reserves to send more money to Ukraine. The move would target reserve funds that this House has authorized and appropriated for this particular purpose, a purpose that is worthy, certainly more worthy than continuing involvement in the conflict in Ukraine that could lead to tragic escalatory accident. And I can't even believe this is a controversial view to take on this floor, but I believe that the U.S. Army reserves should actually be for the U.S. Army. And by the way, it's not as if we don't have needs for our Army. How about the families of our soldiers? Right now, child care is a real problem. We've got Army soldiers that are driving an hour and a half or more each way just to drop off their kids at child care. We could invest that money in our military families. I could take you to the Army town of Crestview, Florida, in my district, where the school counselors who are still helping Army families deal with the lingering effects of just deployment after deployment after deployment. They could use more resources. They tell me, Congressman, if we had more resources for these Army families, they could improve quality of life and improve mental health. And not for nothing, but the Army was taking a leading role in hypersonics for our country, where we have fallen behind China. If we got an extra $200 million laying around the Army, how about we invested in making sure that with hypersonic weapons, we can hit a moving target? I don't know, like China can. But no, indeed, we see this attempt to drain resources away for Ukraine. When Joe Biden talked about campaigning for the soul of the nation, I just assumed it was our nation, not Ukraine. And Ukraine is no Garden of Eden for democracy. Senator Lee pointed out in a report that the CIA had to directly confront Zelensky about his own personal corruption. In Ukraine, they've canceled the presidential elections. Call me old-fashioned, but I actually prefer democracies that hold elections rather than canceling elections. And while there were many concerns about the death of Navalny appropriately, people forget the fact that Zelensky jailed a journalist, Gonzalo Lira, and that journalist died in a Ukrainian prison. So tonight you will hear President Biden come into this House. And the one thing that President Biden has in common with the American people is that both were far better off 4 years ago. Joe Biden physically and the rest of us economically. Now, as a member of the House Armed Services Committee, I will call for an investigation of any efforts to drain U.S. reserves to go and fund this war in Ukraine, and I would invite my fellow members of the Armed Services Committee to join me. And Democrats, you know what this reminded me of? When all the Democrats were crying alligator tears about President Trump using DOD money to go fund the wall. And you may accuse me of hypocrisy now because I supported President Trump in that endeavor, but I don't like the Biden administration going beyond what we set forth with our Article 1 powers. But at least if I'm being a hypocrite, I was doing so for the defense of America's borders and America's interests to stop an invasion that is killing hundreds of thousands of people through the introduction of fentanyl, and an invasion that is diminishing the economic prospects of working people in this country. When they're hypocrites, Mr. Speaker, they serve as hypocrites so that they can go and fund the pensions of government workers in Ukraine. And not for nothing, but it wasn't that long ago that we found a person connected to the defense industrial complex in Ukraine exiting the country with $1 million in U.S. cash in a shoebox. The corruption is real. America's interests are illusory, and we should never drain $200 million out of our family or out of our Army that should go to military families, that should go to soldiers, and that should go to America's capabilities. It is America's capabilities that will define whether or not we hold the high ground, not which guy in a tracksuit is running Crimea. I yield back.